Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to speak about Yoshon, some basics, hopefully without getting too deep into it that confuses everybody. I'm going to be speaking on I'm going to divide what I'm speaking about into 5 different parts. Each one of them, I'm guessing 5 to 10 minutes. First we'll do some real basics. Then we'll talk for a few minutes about why some people care about Yoshon and some people don't. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about how the guide to Yoshon Chodosh works, as it's called. I'm going to go some details, grain by grain, just to get a feel for what goes on. And we'll ask you to talk about Yoshon here in Chicago. What's special here, or how things run here in Chicago. Okay. First thing is, Yoshon only applies to the 5 primary grains: wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and oats. Anything that doesn't have one of those grains is not a Yoshon issue. So when somebody calls up and says, I have rice cakes and I want to know if they're Yoshon, okay, we just say, no, it's not a problem, don't worry about it. Okay, the only things that have these 5 primary grains, as we talk later on in the second to last section, I'm going to talk to you more details about which of those things within wheat and barley, etc., could be an issue. But it can only be things that have those 5 grains in them. The second thing is that the word Yoshon means old, and the word Chodosh, which is the opposite of Yoshon, means new. Chodosh means new. What does that mean, new and old? And that is as follows. The Yoshon means is every grain, every one of these 5 grains, is not allowed to be eaten by those who care about eating Yoshon, cannot be eaten unless it was in existence on the second day of Pesach, the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. If it was there, if it was even starting to grow, even taking root by the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach, then that item has been around for a while. It's called Yoshon. It's old. It's been here for a long time. If it was planted after that time, someone planted something after Pesach, then that's Chodosh. It's new. It's in a relative sense, it's new until it hits the next Pesach. Come the next Pesach, it becomes Yoshon. Okay, so when we say something is Yoshon, means it's old. It's been around for a while, means since before Pesach. And Chodosh means it's newer since Pesach. So, for example, if something was grown a year and a half ago, then it's automatically Yoshon. So people ask us, I know that this was Yoshon last year, but this box of noodles, is it still Yoshon this year? Okay, so that's from a question from ignorance. Okay, because once Pesach passes, everything at that point becomes what we call Yoshon. Okay, so if you look at don't worry about these details exactly, but if you look at a calendar for the year, from Pesach until like around now we're holding right before Tisha B'Av, until the middle of the summer, everything is Yoshon. Because anything that's in the market, if you go to the store and you buy a box of cookies, that box of cookies comes from grain that was planted before Pesach. I mean, that grain is from many, many months ago. So that for sure is Yoshon. It's only now in the summertime, in the late summer, the first harvest of things that were planted after Pesach start to come to market. And then slowly as we go through, more like Rosh Hashanah time, Sukkot time, more and more things start becoming a problem. And then as we get into the winter, even more things become a concern.
That's how long it takes from planting the seeds to the time that you harvest?
So we'll talk in a minute about spring wheat, what it's called. It's planted right after Pesach. It gets harvested in the summer, and it comes to market within a few weeks after that. Okay, so we'll talk about how we know these kind of information, but that's what happens.
But the shelf life of things is very long, so how do you know that it was there?
Whether it's from before or after?
Before, after the previous period.
I'm going to explain that to you. I'm just trying to give just the ideas of what makes something Chodosh or Yoshon. Yoshon again means that it's old, so as a sort of a rule of thumb, Chodosh becomes a problem around this time of the year, maybe Rosh Hashanah, until through the winter, gets more and more things become a question, and then come Pesach, everything is good.
What about the root? Why Yoshon? Why it's where it comes from?
Okay, I actually was not going to explain that, but I'm more than happy to explain just for a minute, just for the hashkafa of it, if you'd like to understand. What you'd like to understand is that there are many mitzvahs in the Torah, the Ramban explains, there are many mitzvahs in the Torah that are given that before we partake of something of our own, we recognize that Hashem is the one who gives it to us. So before we partake of our own, of these grains, which we consider the primary grains that are around, we first have to show our recognition that Hashem is the one who gave it to us. And that happened on the second day of Pesach, when we brought a carbon, the Beis Hamikdash is called the carbon ha'omer, like the same word from Spheres ha'omer. We count from that day when they brought the carbon. Once we brought that carbon to Hashem, it's brought from barley. The first grain that grows is the barley. Once we give some of that to Hashem, now, so to speak, now we're okay to eat from it. Before we've given any of that over, it's inappropriate to us to eat it ourselves. Okay, so those are the basics. They're just what makes food is or is not Yoshon. Okay. So now, as many of you know, I won't take a poll here in the room, but most from people in the United States are not careful about only eating Yoshon. Most of them will eat anything, whether it is or is not Yoshon. We ourselves, in seriously, give hashgacha to food that's not Yoshon, recognizing that that's considered acceptable as kosher. But at the same time, there are other people who will only eat Yoshon, okay? In the way the terminology is, they're makbid on Yoshon. They're careful to only eat food that's Yoshon. So, where does that come from? In short, what that is as follows. The Gemara talks about whether a person has to be particular about eating Yoshon even out of Eretz Yisrael. Does it apply even out of Eretz Yisrael? The Shulchan Aruch brings down the conclusion, the Rambam brings down the conclusion of that, then is that yes, a person needs to be careful to only eat Yoshon even out of Eretz Yisrael, even when there's no Beis HaMikdash. It applies at all times and all places. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says it, the Rambam brings it. That's very accepted as what should be the halacha. And at the same time, the Ramah says, there might be reasons why you don't have to do it where we live, because it's not so clear. It's something a little complicated called the svek sveker. It's not so clear whether the grain we have is actually from this year. Maybe the grain that I have was what's been sitting in a silo for many months, and it's been from even from before Pesach. Others give other reasons. Maybe it doesn't apply to farms that are farmed by not Jewish people. The farmer was not Jewish. Maybe then it doesn't apply. Maybe it doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz altogether, even though the Gemara seems to say that it does. So there are different opinions. Again, if you open up the Shulchan Aruch itself, the Shulchan Aruch says, of course, you have to be particular. If you look at the practice of most fine from people, most people are not particular to only eat Yoshon. So in the end, it really depends on your Messiah, on who you come from, where it came from that you find your piyat and halacha. Again, most Jews are not particular, and the way it sort of breaks down to the following: in Eretz Yisrael, what we call the mahadran hashgachas, the better, I don't know if that's the right word, but the better hashgachas are all particular that the food has to always be Yoshon. Okay, so for example, if you'll see something with what we would call a recommended hashgacha in Eretz Yisrael, that food is automatically Yoshon. Okay, they're always careful about it. Most Americans are not.
Since when is this? Do you know? Is it a recent thing?
That the Israelis better hashgacha. As far as I don't know. As far as I know, it's been around for a long time. In America, the mainstream hashgachas and the mainstream from community is not particular, and they're not careful about Yoshon. Hasidim are particularly not makbid on Yoshon, but if you want to call it from the more yeshivish community, and in Chicago, the brisk community is very particular about it. Okay, so there's different, if you want to use different groups of what people do. By no means is this the forum to discuss the gory details of that, or why one should or shouldn't do that. But there are people out there who take it very seriously, and the people who completely ignore it. They pay completely no attention to whether food is or is not Yoshon. Any questions for Riyad so far? Yes.
Question. If you buy flour, and I assume the FDA says that if you make flour, it has to have an expiration date tested by, is a defined amount of time. I don't know if it is, but I would think so.
Yes.
Did you rely on that date on the flour package to know whether it was something from before Pesach?
So we're going to talk, when we talk about the guide to Chodosh, that's exactly what the guide tries to do, to help you pinpoint whether you think is or is not Chodosh. Yes.
For those who are particular in Eretz Yisrael, does it only person or the grain? Meaning if it's grain from Eretz Yisrael coming to America, how does it feel?
So there's more reason to be careful about grain that grew in Eretz Yisrael than that grew out of Eretz Yisrael. So a little bit depends on the grain, not on the person. But it's different practices. You know what I mean? If somebody here may go to the Rav and the Rav will tell them, yes, you should be careful. I say, no, don't worry about it. We're never careful about it. Don't worry about it more. You know? So, okay.
Before you go to the next slide,
Yes.
are you going to tell us who they are and what they do?
No. I try to find enough pictures that everybody can recognize their favorite couple on the slide. And you say, oh, good, I'm glad that my person is up there. I hope everybody found someone here that they like. And I don't know who the other guy is with the big beard, but I like the guy with my beard, and that's...
Let's say, for example, you could put Bob over there. Because was he involved with this issue?
No. Again, as I mentioned, in particular, Hasidim are particularly not makbid on Yoshon. Okay. The next is like this. The guide to Chodosh. Okay. What is the guide to Chodosh? 30, 40, I don't know how many years, maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was a group of people who wanted to be careful about only eating Yoshon. That's what they wanted to do. And they started on their own collecting information to how they could do it themselves. Okay? It by no means was then what it is now. Okay? Now it's much more popular and much more easy for people to do that, to keep eating only Yoshon. At that time, there's this little group of people. They actually, when they asked Moshe Feinstein at that time, should they tell people about what they're doing? He said, look, just keep it quiet. You do what you want to do and pass it among yourselves, but keep it relatively quiet. That's changed now. But at that time, they kept thinking, they sort of on their own, they were collecting information, and to try to figure out how they themselves could be careful about eating Yoshon. Okay? Part 2, which is not for today, is, if we ever spoke about this again, I would explain to you how it's really pretty easy. There's the 80-20 rule. It's really pretty easy for people to just about be completely Yoshon, okay, with very little effort. Okay? So, but that's what they were doing. They said, look, let's do what we can to make our food Yoshon. And they went through started all kinds of things. And slowly with time, this person, Mr. or Rabbi Herman, I don't know how he goes by, collected more and more information to the point that every year he puts out a number of versions of what's called the Guide to Chodosh. Okay? And that's the Bible of how people know what's going on if they want to eat only Yoshon. Okay? Okay, that's what the guide looks like. This is from an old version, but that's what the guide looks like. So first I just wanted to say, hey, you should get it. For people who answer questions, the Seriously office gets it. But if you want to answer questions, all information about Yoshon comes from here. Okay, you could get it. There's a couple of ways you can get it. You could just email. You can send an email to that email address. It'll bounce you right back with the guide. You could subscribe. You could get it. It's always on our website. Rabbi Sharp puts it on as soon as it comes out. Every time there's an update or a new one, he pops it onto there. Or you can order it for a few dollars. You can order your own that comes to your house. Okay, so this is it. This is the way people know what is or is not Yoshon, except of course if it says it on the package. Okay, so how does the guide work? Okay? How does he figure out which food is Yoshon and which food is not? I mean, how would he know whether the box of cookies that I have is or is not Yoshon? So it's really a two-part approach. There's a little third part afterwards. Okay, two-part approach is like this. First is figure out the cutoff dates. What I mean, what's a cutoff date? The government, the United States government, tracks every commodity in the United States. Every crop, you get a report every single week of every crop in every state of where it is. If you want to know how much cotton was planted, well, in Alabama, this many percent is planted, this many at this stage, and at this stage, and at this stage. Okay? And they track wheat and barley just like they track everything else. So, by watching the government reports, you can know exactly when stuff was planted. That is to say, to know if it was planted before or after Pesach. And you can also know when it was harvested. You can know where it's moving along in the whole process. You could watch it every single week. The government puts out a report of every grain to tell you this is where it's up to. This is where it's up. It's been planted. It's at this stage of growth now. It's been harvested, and then together with that, he's in contact with the mills, and he says to the mill, "When are you going to start using the new flour that grew from this year's crop, meaning the after Pesach crop?" Okay. When the new grain starts being processed in a mill, it's not a small thing. It's not like it's just, today we got a truck from last year's grain, and now we got a truck from the new grain. It's a big to-do. It has to do with protein levels. It's a big to-do when they switch over. So he tracks it. Okay? He knows, and he determines a cutoff date. The cutoff date for barley is this day. The cutoff date for oats is this day. Cutoff meaning is, this is the day, from before then, everything was for sure Yoshon. After that, the mills and the processing plants started getting the new produce. Okay, and that he determines a cutoff date. And his cutoff date will be August 22nd. Okay, he has a date, and he decides this is his cutoff date of when, afterwards, they're using the new grains. And then he looks at the package of food, and he'll tell you. I'll explain to you in a second. He can tell you how to look at the package and know when it was made. So if the cutoff date is September 1st, and this package of food was made on September 2nd, it was made after the cutoff date. Well, if it's after his cutoff date, then it's potentially Chodosh. If the cutoff date is September 1st and this was made on August 10th, well, then it's before the cutoff date, then it's the show Yoshon. Okay? So that's the approach that he uses to determine whether something is or is not Yoshon. He decides, this is the cutoff date. Until this date, barley was Yoshon in the processing plant. Then he says, okay, well, when was this package made? When was this food made? Before that date or after that date? And so with those two pieces of information, you could pick up a package of food and figure out whether it is or is not Yoshon. Okay?
Why does the government care so much about this?
It's for helping farmers, and it helps people who track grains and things like that they're keeping track of when everything grows. I can't tell you exactly why they do it, but they're very meticulous. I'm telling you, by state, every week, by every state, by every crop.
So is every state a different date then?
So what he does is,
Or every
every he does it roughly by when it's coming in. It's not exact. You're right. If this state is a little before that state, it's not exact. But if you read the guide, you find out that the Midwest always gets their stuff earlier. I guess we're closer to a certain farmer, and we get it earlier. But he makes his cutoff. He says, for the Midwest, the cutoff is like this, and everybody else, the cutoff is like that. Okay, and then
other countries, like Argentina, they have different seasons.
Yes, this is only for the United States. I should say that. I'll say it again. It's only for the United States. Okay, this information is for the United States. The way things go here and they go in other countries is not always the same. Either the United States and Canada. Okay, what goes on in Canada is also very similar. Okay, we'll pause for a second.
The stock market tracks these commodities. They sell futures and grain.
Well, I understand for futures and grains, but I don't
Okay,
understand
so a third part of the guide is this is sort of like an aside, which is he also gets information on which products have hashkacha for Yoshon, okay, or they are always Yoshon. Okay, if a certain plant only uses a certain thing that's always Yoshon, he tracks them also. So part 1 and 2, which is to determine a particular box of cookies or a bag of pasta, that's so to speak the main part of the guide. But he also collects lots of information on who gives hashkacha on a product. If we tell him that Tel Aviv pizza is always going to be Yoshon, or we tell him that this packaged good is always Yoshon, the Rav HaMaksha takes responsibility, he puts that into the guide. People know to look out for those things.
So Yosef Herman and the author of this guide to Chodosh is working with the federal government.
No, the federal government publishes it. They just push the information. Then you'll see in a second, he then goes to manufacturers and says, how can I read the code on your package to know when your product was made? So if he knows that the as of September 1st is when the new grain is coming to town, and he says to manufacturer, I could tell that yours was made before or after September 1st, then I could tell you if it's good or not good. Okay, so the government is just pushing out this information. They just push out reports every week, comes out.
I was to say they don't have a very large stock of old flour sitting there, and Chodosh is now on this day, but they're still using old stock.
It's a good question. And it is, as the years have gone on, actually, the United States holds less and less stock of old produce. He tracks it also. The government tracks it also, how much they have. But it's true that a specific manufacturer, let's say a particular bakery, is getting in, we know that the cutoff date was, let's say, September 1st. But they still have bags and bags of flour. So it's true that past the cutoff date, there's a certain amount of stuff that's still being used past the cutoff date that was just left in their warehouse. What?
You're assuming it's hush.
But he's saying, past that cutoff date, we can't be sure that it is. Okay, so if the cutoff date is September 1st, if it was made on September 2nd, is it chances are they probably still had old stuff? Probably. But he has to use some way to determine it. So he says, this is when the mill started shipping it to manufacturers. So he uses that as his cutoff.
All right, so those who hold Yoshon will stock up. Manufacturers or individuals will stock up before that cutoff date.
So actually, not necessarily. If we ever do our second part of how to do this in your house, I'll explain to you how they do it.
Thank you.
At this point, 30 years ago, that's what people did. Okay, nowadays, it's not necessary. They don't need to do that. Okay, there are lots of ways of eating Yoshon without having to stock it.
Well, no one jewels out of pasta because everybody hit the aisles.
Right.
Cereal. People that I talk to just stack up on the cereal and the cereal.
You have to wait for part 2? You have to wait for part 2? Okay.
Don't leave.
No, it's not going to be today. No, not for today.
Oh, part 2 is
Not for
session.
today. Yeah.
Okay.
Session 2. Today we're trying to talk about how we understand Yoshon, how we help someone who wants to know something, whether something is or is not Yoshon, etc. If you want to know how to run Yoshon in your house, part 2. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to try to understand what people find most complicating about the guide, and that is, how do you know when the food is made? Okay, and he's got pages and pages to tell you for each thing, not pages for each thing, but pages of dates and information to figure out when things were made. Okay, and it goes like this. There are 2 basic ways to figure out when a product was actually manufactured. Okay, there are 2 basic ways. The first one is by the expiration date. Okay? It says this product expires on this day. Okay, don't use it after a certain day. Call the manufacturer. How much time do you write for your expiration date before you manufactured it? And they say, for this I write 6 months after I produce it, that's when it expires. Well, that tells me that if it was produced on this day, I know when the expiration date, I know when if it expires, here like this. The company tells the guy, this is how many months we write that it should expire. This is how many days it expires. Okay, for example. Barilla oven-ready pasta. Okay? The company tells him that it expires 20 months after it was packed. Okay? Well, once they tell me that, if I look at the box and it says that it expires in May 2015, well, what do I know now? Okay, if I count that, I'm going to find out that it was made in September 2013. Okay, so just the company tells me the expiration date is this many months or weeks or days, whatever it is, after it was produced, so then I could track back and figure out when it was made. Okay, so Mr. Herman does that for you. He goes to the companies and says, "Tell me, how much time do you give before you let your pasta and your everything?" He does a zillion things. How much time do you give before you let it expire? They give him the information. It's not private. It's what it is. And then look at the code. It says it expires on May 14, 2015. If we count backwards, we find out that it expires on a certain date. Okay? So now, if September 14th was before or after the cutoff date in that year, in the year 2013, if it was before or after, you can now know whether this box was or was not Yoshon. Okay? Now, obviously, this box is Yoshon today. I mean, you don't want to eat it anyhow. But besides that, I mean, it's fine. But it's Yoshon because if it was produced in 2013, it's been through a lot of Pesach. Pesach 2014, 15, and 16. But this pasta was in the box in 2013. So it passed through Pesach of 2014 and 15 and 16. So it's Yoshon. It's been in existence over Pesach.
So even though the flour might have not, the original flour
was Chodosh when it was made into pasta, but then came 6 months later, it hit Pesach 2014. Okay, now it's good. Now you can eat it. So now this thing is, so to speak, very Yoshon. It's expired. Don't eat it anyhow. But it's very Yoshon because it passed through many Pesach, and we're good. It doesn't have a concern.
So at some point the Chodosh becomes Yoshon.
Every Pesach. Second day, the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach, everything becomes Yoshon. Everything is Yoshon. Okay? And Rabbi Eisenbach breathes a sigh of relief and he says, no more Yoshon questions for the next few months.
I can imagine this is a full-time job.
So, Mr. Herman?
Right, because, for example, maybe something happened, there's a variable, and they changed the expiration date. Instead of being X amount, it became shorter. Does he call every
So there's two parts of what he does. One is in the lead-up, like this time of the year, he's collecting information from the companies. And then once the time comes, like now, he starts an opposite, which is consumers start bombarding him with questions. He answers questions on the phone. He doesn't pick up the phone, but people leave messages saying, "I have a box of this and this, and I can't find it in the garden. Is it okay or not?" And then he researches it for them live, leaves them a message every night. Okay? So he runs this for the later 6 months of the year. He's sitting answering questions and researching things for people. Yeah, so the person puts a lot of effort into it. Okay, a lot of work goes into this.
paying his salary. Right.
He doesn't get paid a salary. It used to be completely for free. In recent years, you have to pay if you want the printed card. The email card you get for free. But that's just like to cover postage and stuff. Yeah?
You can leave him
A message. You leave a message, say, "Hi, I have a box of these cookies, and I can't find it in the card, and it says this and this code on it, or the code says the wrong thing. I was expecting, is it good?" And you call back that night, and there's a message that says, "So the person who called about this thing and this and this thing," he doesn't know who you are. He just says 20 messages, say, "So the person who called about this and about this and about this, and here's the answer to everybody's questions." Okay, he puts in a lot of effort. This person. I mean, it's.
But there are different harvests too. Like this is ongoing and changing all the time. I would think.
So-
Information because there could be harvest in January too.
So he's tracking. He is watching everything. That's this. It's amazing. He puts in an amazing amount of work. Again, it started off as a little thing for a couple of people. For, so to speak, his friends. A small group of people. With time, it expanded. You would think at this point somebody would pay him a salary. Literally, he spends amazing amounts of energy and time on doing this. Okay.
Put them in an endowment or something.
No. This is just this guy. This is, from what we understand, just the same Shemaim. He's doing it. He wants to do help people. Okay. So the simplest way is when there's an expiration date. Company has an expiration date. He tells you. Look in the guide. It tells you this is how to understand the expiration date. It's 20 months. It's 6 months. It's 2 months. You have the packing, and then you know when it was made. Okay. Then you can turn back to. And he says, well, and then it tells you the cutoff date. Cutoff date, and I know when it was made. I know whether it was good or it's not good. Okay. Now the other one that's more complicated is production date codes. And that means as follows. Manufacturers who don't put an expiration date will put a production date. They'll stamp it onto their product. Okay, I didn't put pictures onto it, but if you look on any package, if you look carefully enough, you'll see ink jetted on, some gibberish, a bunch of numbers and letters, etc. Okay? So he says to you, I'm going to show you the six main ways that he shows you of how a production code looks like. And each one of them, when you look at this number just by itself, 021815, not very clear what that means. And this is actually a pretty simple example, okay, where 2 means February, 18th of February in 2015. Okay, so as they manufactured it, they inkjetted onto it. This was made on February 18th, 2015. That's for their own internal control. Company just wants to keep track of things. If somebody calls up, this is a question. So this is a pretty simple code, okay? Again, this tells us it was made on this day. Then he says to you, this product has in it barley. The cutoff date for barley is whatever day, and now it's good or it's not good. Okay, here's an example of that. Okay, here's that cutoff date. It was produced on February 18th. Okay, if the cutoff date is afterwards, if the cutoff date is past February 18th, then this food is Yoshon. It was made before the cutoff date. If the cutoff date is earlier, then you would say it's Chodosh, or at least it's possibly Chodosh.
So if it's before the cutoff date, yeah.
Okay, the cutoff. This was made on February 18th. Okay, if the cutoff date was February 19th, that means everything from February 19th and on is Chodosh. So everything from February 19th and early.
You got it wrong. That's what he wrote. Cutoff date February 19th.
Later, so it's Yoshon.
Right. The
Cutoff for the barley.
cutoff barley. No, the cutoff for barley is the new barley came in on February 19th. So if this was made on February 18th, this was made before the new barley showed up. So it's okay. It was made before the cutoff date. It was made before the new stuff came in. So it's Yoshon. It's very confusing. I know. People.
I don't understand how to read the guide and tell people it's Yoshon.
That's why we're here. I'll do it again. Okay, this thing was made on February 18th. You got that part so far?
Right.
It was made on February 18th. Okay, now, how do I know if it's Chodosh or Yoshon? Well, when did this company get their new barley? If they got it on February 19th, would this be Chodosh or would it be Yoshon? If they got their new stuff on February 19th, that means on February 18th they're using last year's stuff. So then it's Yoshon, it's old. They're using old barley. If they got their new barley on February 17th, then they're already using the new stuff and making this product.
Okay, so are they mandated by the FDA to either put on an expiration date or
I don't know, but just about everything's got something on it. If you look carefully enough.
So if they have like regionals, old metals are having a problem with their flour.
Cutoff date means when did they get the new stuff?
Which ones are having?
So if they got the new stuff after this was produced, so what's the problem? And this was made with old stuff.
So
It's made before the cutoff date.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm going to go through 5 other ways that production dates look like. Okay, here's another one. Okay, 13230. Okay, what does that mean? 13. He tells you. For this company, each company has their way of doing it. He tells you. In this company, 13 means the year. It was made in 2013. 230 means the 230th day of the year. Okay, which is August 18th. Okay, you can look on the internet. You can buy a chart. It's August 18th. So 13230 means it was made on August 18th of 2013. Okay? That's how this company does it. Lots of people do it like that. It's a very common way to use it. Just to write like that.
it's very easy to adjust the numbers.
Right. Every midnight it just turns up. Exactly. Okay. That's another one. It's a similar one. This is made on the 2425. And this company means it was made on the 242nd day of the 5 year of 2015. So again, if it was made on this day, the cutoff date, and that is August 30th. If the cutoff date is September 1st, it was made before they got the new produce in. So this stuff is Yoshon. If the cutoff date was August 15th, this was made after that, and it's potentially Chodosh.
So we need to know what the cutoff date is equal to in the number of days of the year.
Open up the book. If you open up his guide, it says it right there. It says for this product, it says this is the code, and this is the cutoff date for that company. This is what you need to do. Okay? Number 4.
Does he give you the cutoff date? Does he give you the cutoff date in days of the year?
If that company uses days of the year, he tells it to you. It's right there. Okay, this is almost the same thing. Here they put the year first. 3/2/24. Okay, that's year 3 means 2013, and 2/24 is 24th day of the year. Okay. I guess they figured that if this product is around from 2003, not from 2013, you probably can tell. Okay. Okay. Number 5. Okay, this company is a little different. They go 230. Stop it. AC.
That means it was a hot day. They need air conditioning.
Air conditioning. No, that's not what it means. That means it's 224 days a year. And in this company, AC is their own special way of counting years. Okay? I don't know, whatever it means for this company, maybe they started...
230. What's 230?
Sorry, yes, typo. Okay, sorry, 230 days a year. And AC means, who knows what it means to that company. Maybe they started counting on 2012 when they opened up, and the first year was A, and the next year was B, and the next year was C. However they figured it out. Okay? He'll tell you. No, he'll tell you what it means. But AAC is some special way of their own marking what year it is. Instead of marking with a number, they mark with a letter based on some, whatever mishagas they have, or how they want to count it. Okay, yeah, that's a typo, sorry. Okay, and number 6 is another company who's doing it. Over here, the M9 will tell you, he probably knows what M9 stands for, but it's not important. Don't pay any attention to it. Okay, M9 maybe means what line it was made on, maybe it was the guy who's running that machine. But for our purposes, 3 is the year, 230 is the day of the year, it's August 18th, so now you know when it was made. Okay? You sort of get the gist of it. Okay, the companies each company finds a way to mark when the product was made. Mr. Herman says, I'll find out for them how they mark it. He says, tell me, I have a package. What is M9 3230, man? They explain to him what it means. He puts it into the guide, and everybody else can figure it out for them. Okay. Any questions left on this section? Okay. On we go. Okay. Now I'm going to... So that's how the guide works, and that's how people who want to keep Yoshon, who want no information, they turn the pages of the guide, or they press Control F, and they search in the guide, and they find the thing in there, and they say, this is the information I need to know for this particular product. Now I'm going to go through the 5 different grains, and tell you a little bit more about each one of them. Okay. Here's good news. Good news first. Okay. Rye and spelt, the way they're grown in the United States, they're always Yoshon. That is to say, they're planted late in the winter, and they always, by the time they come to market, by the time they get harvested, it's after Pesach. So they're always Yoshon because they're always planted before Pesach. They're always harvested after Pesach. So what a great deal. Okay, it's always Yoshon. Okay, now rye bread contains wheat in it. Okay, but things that just have rye or just have spelt that are made in the United States are always Yoshon. Okay, that's the good news. Okay, I think I might put it first. Okay, barley. Okay, barley. Not these ones are not as good. Okay, barley. How do people use barley? The most simple way to use barley is what's called pearl barley, or just plain barley, like what you might put into your challah or into a soup. That begins pretty soon, like now in the fall time. When as soon as it gets harvested, they process it and off it goes to companies to sell to you. Beer is made from barley, but beer takes time until it's manufactured, until they create the beer, age the beer. It's like winter time before beers start being an issue for Yoshon. And there's something called malted barley. You see that in cereals. It's in some flours. We at the CRC are not particular about it. Too complicated to explain right now, but we are not particular. In the guide, he explains why some are careful and some are not. We don't pay attention to that. Okay? Those are things made out of barley.
Don't pay attention to
We even if it's in a product, that doesn't affect its Yoshon status. We ignore it as far as Yoshon status.
We can tell people who follow toward asking about it.
That we don't pay attention to those things. He says in the guide, if you care about malt, like this. If you don't care about malt, if you do care about it, then here's the thing.
But we don't certify anything Yoshon. Malted barley.
Yes, we do. You want it?
We make sure our bakeries are, is it in the bakeries? Say the bakeries are Yoshon?
So it affects things that we certify like as in bakery, but it affects questions that people ask us. They say, can I eat this box of cookies? I picked up the guide and it said, this cereal has malted barley in it. Should I be careful about that? And then we'll answer based on this thing. That we tell them not to worry about the malted barley. Too complicated.
The whole thing is preference anyways.
I call up and say, hi, my family wants only Yoshon. My brother-in-law is coming over and he only eats Yoshon. I wonder if I could serve him this cereal. So
he's not going to malted barley.
So that's a fair answer. Okay, next. Oats. Okay, what do people do with oats? Oats, oatmeal, breakfast cereal, can be used for baking. It's lots of gluten-free things. It's just for your information. People ask us, it's a regular question, well, if it's gluten-free, does that mean it's automatically Yoshon? And they ask that because Yoshon the only thing that need to be Yoshon are from the 5 primary grains. Well, things that are gluten-free don't have any wheat, rye, spelt, or barley in them. Okay, so they say, well, then how could it be a problem? Like, how could it be a Yoshon issue if it doesn't have those grains in it? And the answer is that sometimes they have oats in them. If they don't have oats and they're gluten-free, then it's always Yoshon. It's not a Yoshon issue. But there are many gluten-free products that do have oats in them, like Cheerios. Okay, Cheerios is now gluten-free, but of course it's made completely of oats. So those things, and that begins fall, beginning of the winter, when those things start coming to market. Okay, wheat. Wheat is by far the most common thing that people have questions about for Yoshon. And it turns out that there are 3 different types of wheat. Okay? The first wheat is called winter wheat. It grows in the winter. It doesn't actually grow in the winter. It's planted before the winter. It starts to grow a little bit before the winter. Then it goes dormant for the rest of the winter. And come springtime, it continues to grow. That wheat is used for things that are crunchy, like crackers and matzah. That's what it's good for. Hard pretzels.
Cookies.
Depends. But if they're harder, then they could use winter wheat. Okay, and those are always Yoshon. They're always Yoshon because they're planted before Pesach, and they're harvested in like June. Right? So that means that they always go through a Pesach. They get planted Sukkot time. They sit dormant they grow a little bit, then they go dormant for a couple of months, and then they continue growing after the winter. Okay? They always make it through Pesach. Okay? In the United States, you can't buy winter wheat that's not Yoshon. Okay? So winter wheat is always Yoshon. So for example, just as an example, when the book comes out, it'll say that this and this brand of all-purpose flour is always Yoshon. Why is that brand always Yoshon? Because that company makes their all-purpose flour out of winter wheat. Okay, he knows that company makes their all-purpose flour out of winter wheat. Well, if they do that, then they're always Yoshon. Okay, that'll be in the book. It'll say this brand is always Yoshon because he knows what kind of flour they use, winter wheat. Okay. The next kind of wheat is spring wheat. Okay, or what you call high gluten flour or baking flour. Okay, that grows in the springtime. It's planted in the springtime. It's used for making things that need to be fluffier or puffed up, have more gluten in them. Bread and pizza, bagels. Those get planted Pesach time. This year, even though Pesach was very late, most of it was planted after Pesach. If you're curious, the government tracked it. This year most of it was planted after Pesach, even though Pesach was very late. Comes to the harvest around now, August time, and so as soon as it comes to market, he's already said that in the Midwest this year it's already coming to bakeries, to fresh bakeries. Till it gets to processed products, it takes a little more. That's for spring wheat. Okay, and then there's one last kind of wheat, which is called durum wheat, and that's a special kind of wheat that's used for making pasta. And that's come a little later in the season, winter time, that'll already be a Yoshon issue. Okay, the lid.
So pasta has less of a time.
It just takes longer.
So less of a problem.
Yeah,
of a problem.
Yeah,
More
but
time to stock up on the pasta.
right for those who want to stack up. Okay, and then of course I just throw this in. There's probably more things to stick on here. There are lots of things that have flour in them that people may not think of that have flour in them. I put down 3 of them: soy sauce and licorice and French fries that have like coating, like seasoning on them. But there's lots of places. Okay, so people who want to only eat Yoshon need to read ingredients and see what's in there. It'll always be listed if it's in there. They have to just look around.
And there's no bittul by Yoshon.
There can be bittul, not for today's discussion, but usually in the products that we see, it's not buffalo. You usually don't put it in such a tiny amount that it will be buffalo. But in theory, not for today's discussion, but yes, it's possible for it to be buffalo. Okay. And just to wind up this part of grains, the things that we care about, these are the things, I've mentioned just about all these already, but these are things that you don't have to be particular about. And they are aged whiskey. Almost all whiskey is aged. So if I have a bottle of scotch, and it's 12 years old, okay, guess what? It's been through 12 Pesachs. Okay, so it's for sure Yoshon. Okay, if my bourbon is 3 years old, it's Yoshon. It's always Yoshon because it was around for more than a Pesach. It's always Yoshon. Okay, now there are some whiskeys that are not aged, like vodka, rum. Some of those things are not aged, so even beers. I don't know if you call that it's not a whiskey, but those things have not been through Pesach. Then it's potentially an issue for them. But things that are aged, like aged whiskeys, are not a concern. Okay. I mentioned this already. Israeli Hefsherim, the Mahadran Israeli Hefsherim are all particular that their food needs to be Yoshon. So if I pick up something with a Hefsher that we recommend from there, we know that it's going to be Yoshon. Number 3, things that are made without the 5 primary grains. Rice and corn, okay? They're always Yoshon. unless there's something mixed into them. If I buy something that has just rice and corn, doesn't have 5 grains, it's not a Chodosh problem. And last is things that have vinegar in them. It's a popular question. In the United States, all of our vinegar is made from corn. That's we work with that assumption. So it has vinegar in it. And if you lived in France and you had something pickles made with vinegar, it could be Chodosh. But if you live in the United States, the vinegar is almost always corn, and therefore we don't concern ourselves with it. Any questions before I go to Chicago? Okay, last section. Okay, Yoshon in Chicago. Okay. Bakeries. Okay. North Shore, Emma's, and Tel Aviv are always Yoshon. Bretzis and Jewel, no, they're already soon will be, the things will be Chodosh. Okay. Restaurants. We have disclosure statement. Every restaurant's got a sign in it, and it says whether it is or is not Yoshon. Hopeless for me to try to tell you what is or is not. And it changes all the time. And if you can't figure, a lot of the signs say, ask. Okay, which is the right thing to do. If a person wants to only eat Yoshon, their grandmother is coming over and she only eats Yoshon, they could go to the store and say to them, tell me, I want to buy this and this thing. Is or is it not Yoshon? Okay. Caterers. Okay. As far as you understand, the Midwest Conference Center is always Yoshon. Star Caterers and Siegel are just about always Yoshon. And other ones, you should ask. Okay? In Chicago, a lot of the caterers and a lot of the people who make functions for the public are going to be Yoshon. That has to do with the influence of Ram Salvation and the Briskers here in town, who are very strong on Eagle Yoshon. So there's lots of things that are made for the public that are made as Yoshon because there's such a sizable community who wants to eat that here in town. I think that is. Yeah, that is. Okay. Any more questions? Okay.